So, I like Viva Pinata, and I assume maybe you do too. I'm assuming because you clicked on this video. One really neat thing about the franchise is the texturing in the games. Everything in the game has this very iconic, fluffy feel, and the texture on the pinatas is just peak. So here I am, going to show you how to create a semi-similar texture for your models, like the one you see here. So what we're going to want to start with is a photo editing software. I will be using Photoshop. In the software, create a square canvas. We want it to be black, so I'm simply going to invert this. After we did that, we're going to create a new layer. Grab the rectangle selection tool and drag it out to kind of mimic a paper strip. Fill it and make it white. Then, on that layer, create a mask layer. Grab the gradient tool and kind of fade in one side of the rectangle. And then after that, we're going to duplicate it around to kind of create a pattern. It doesn't have to be perfect. After we kind of filled the canvas, I apply a little bit of a Gaussian blur to kind of soften the edges. Then, before we export it, we're going to offset the texture. Offsetting it will make it so it seamlessly tiles on the 3D model. After that is done, we can either save it out as a PNG or JPEG. After we exported our texture, we're going to want to get to a site like this. For this example, I'm using Normal Map Online. And what this site is going to do is we're going to be able to plug in our texture, and it's going to be able to create a normal map, displacement, ambient, whatever you want basically. So, as you can see, after we imported our texture, it has converted it to a normal map, alongside displacement, ambient, occlusion, all the good stuff. For our project, we're only primarily going to want the normal and ambient occlusion map. So go ahead and download those, and then we will take it to Blender. Okay, now that we're in Blender, we want to have something to put our texture on. As you can see here, I just have a simply UV unwrapped sphere with some random color on it, just to kind of showcase how the texture will affect it. And as you can see here, don't really have too many nodes in besides just base color node and a UV node. What we're going to want to start out with is a base texture. Make sure your color is plugged in and then that color is appropriately displayed. Next, what we're going to want to do is start importing our textures. We can Control-Shift-T, and we can go collect our textures we made. As you can see, the Node Wrangler allows us to simply set up a texture map with our images. We're going to have the base texture. We're going to want this to be a separate thing, because the thing that we're primarily worried about is the texture and how that affects the sphere, not the color. You want the color to be the same. So what we can do is we can get this. I recommend putting a value node, just so we can adjust the value really quickly into our mapping. Then, our ambient occlusion, while it's here, it's not connected. We gotta first make a quick mix shader and set it to color, and then to multiply. We'll put it in to our base texture node and take our ambient occlusion and mix it. As you can see, it kind of just makes the areas in shadow darker. You can adjust that, like I'm about there. Normally too, I would like to adjust the strength of the bump. We don't need it to be that strong. So something like that. And as you can see, we're already kind of getting a pinata-y feel. So once we have this, what we can do is we're going to duplicate the base layer, expand it a teeny bit, and then we're going to duplicate the texture. Then we'll name this something like shell. Basically, the method we'll be using is kind of like a shell shading method. After we create our duplicate texture, we can go ahead and delete our normal map. We do not need it for this texture. Then, what instead we need to do is we can go ahead and put our roughness color filter into our alpha channel. It's looking a little weird right now, but it'll look good. One thing you can go ahead and do is put a color ramp into this slot, so you can adjust how much will be showing once we fix the transparency issue. Now, one important thing that we need to do is we need to go ahead, go to our settings. To our blend mode, we must then click the alpha hashed. And as you can see, that expanded mesh kind of is now see-through, so we can now see through. We can now see through our base mesh, and it kind of adds a layering effect. Then, what we can do is we go to our modifiers, create a solidify tool, expand it out a little bit, and it'll have the same texture. Expand it out a little bit to add more depth to the texture. Then we could even duplicate it again and add even more depth till it kind of creates that fluffy feel. I personally like this to be a little bigger, but there you have it. You kind of have a pinata-y feel. And eventually, with some adjusting, you'll end up with something like this. I hope you were able to find this tutorial helpful. If you did, maybe consider leaving a like. This is the first time I've ever done a video like this. I don't know if I'll do more in the future, but we'll see. Anyway, peace!